Sullivan Fortner, on behalf of All Night Jazz, WUSF 89.7, thank you so much for giving us some of your time today to talk about music, life, the world, your career, and all those things and how they intertwine. I should add to our listeners that you are a New Orleans born and bred man. You've currently got ribs in the oven, so occasionally you might be jumping up to take care of some rib action. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Good.
For sure.
Awesome.
But I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your time, man. I'm going to jump straight in, Sullivan, because I always like telling artists, I'm going to tell you how this came into my life, and then I want you to talk about it. It's a Grammy-winning album from 2015, a duo record with Cecile McLorin Salvant, the vocalist. Will Vincent, who is a mutual friend of ours, he said, you've got to check it out. So I bought my copy. I went in, it arrived, and I put it in my hi-fi, and you know, I'm not like 17, so I've heard a lot of duo concerts all over the world. I've had a lot of duo records. I put it on. I thought, you know what, I'll get through some emails and what have you. And track one, I'm like, oh, cool, Stevie Wonder. That's kind of, you know, that's not a great American song, but that's a nice way to start a record. Sweet. Visions by Stevie Wonder. I put it on. I'm like ready to do some, like I say, some emails, a bit of paperwork, and I'm like, you start with this texture, you're way up the piano, it's this kind of 2-3 part angular counterpoint. The language is Stravinsky, Hindemith. I mean, it comes from all sorts of interesting places. And an hour later, I couldn't do any work. I had to turn everything off. I lay on my sofa, and it blew me away, man. So congratulations. Make your life better, listeners. Look and buy and listen to that. Sullivan, where does that vocabulary come from, man? Start by talking about your language, that vocabulary. Do you have a classical background? It's a super rich language. Yeah, where does that come from for you?
Well, I mean, start by saying I'm honored to be here. Thank you for taking time out to interview me, just to talk. You know, this is really cool.
We're lucky.
So the language, I would say that I studied classical music at Oberlin Conservatory in Ohio. Oberlin has a really strong classical department, and I studied traditional theory and counterpoint. And I was turned on to people like Messiaen and Stravinsky and, like you say, Hindemith and Bach, you know, and Schumann and Schubert and all kinds of music. And I've really been drawn mostly to orchestral music, really.
Right.
Rimsky-Korsakov.
Yeah.
Mahler.
Yeah.
You know,
wow.
Things like that, you know. And, you know, I really drew a liking, at least during that time period. Messiaen was in my ear, you know.
Right, yeah.
And just reading up about him and different theories of him, like transcribing birds and taking sound pictures and applying it to, you know, different soundscapes and applying it to music. So I just said, let me just improvise something.
Right. Okay.
Oh. Yeah, it wasn't really much.
Yeah, sure, Sully. But do you? I'm pretty sure you're a pretty great reader. Have you played Messiaen's piano music at the piano? Do you cite? I'm not
a very good reader, but I have. As a matter of fact,
it's off again. It's off. If it's ribs or music or.
I just got this.
Oh my gosh, that's heavy. That is heavy. That's like an hour and a half long, maybe 2 hours long to perform that.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Literally, like it's 2 hours long, man. It's super heavy.
It is. And you know, some of his organ works, but not really so much to play it, but just to listen to other people play it and follow along.
Yeah.
And maybe, you know, just analyze it.
Yeah. Okay.
And kind of see where he's drawing from, you know, harmonically, if there's certain things that could be, you know, applied to, you know, certain things that I'm doing, certain ideas, certain motifs that he uses.
Yeah, so you're lifting that language or some of the colors you like, and you're able to put them behind Cecile McLorin Salvant singing Visions by Stevie Wonder.
Oh, yeah, or anybody, you know.
Yeah. Well, I want to follow that thread through a bit later, but let me keep with something you just said, Mahler, Rimsky-Korsakov, orchestral, because the second thing that struck me about this is, again, there's kind of, I mean, if you go to the great duo record, it's Bill Evans, Tony Bennett, there's a kind of, if you saw the waveforms of Bill Evans, Tony Bennett, right, that whole famous record, the waveforms would kind of be this, right? It's a great record. We all love that record. The waveforms with you and Cecile, I mean, if you saw it on like a SoundCloud thing or whatever, or in a studio, it's really huge peaks and troughs. You know, Cecile can have this pianissimo sound, as can you, and then you get really big, and deliberately you're taking the music on a sort of big narrative journey, aren't you? You're kind of really, does that come from orchestral stuff? And Mahler especially, those kind of peaks and troughs? And
it does. It comes from orchestral things. It also comes from, you know, my upbringing, playing in church for so long.
Right.
And the idea that the music really provides a landscape for the singer, you know what I mean? Yeah. And, you know, that requires a certain amount of sensitivity to lyrics. It requires a certain amount of understanding of register and where the voice falls. Yeah. Where her voice, the different types of colors that she produces, you know, when she sings, and then trying to figure out ways to bring that out and maybe even contrast it, maybe have like a little conversation. So, yeah.
Here's my next big thing for you.
All right.
I went to New Orleans 5 years ago. You were born and bred in New Orleans. You now live in New York, I think. Two major world jazz cities, the two major world jazz cities. Before I went to New Orleans, a musician said to me, he said, "Hey man, New Orleans isn't America. There's America, and then there's New Orleans."
I got that right.
And I was like, "What do you?" That's like a weird thing to say. This is before I went there, and then I went there for a week, and then I got it. I understood. You're born and bred from that. I want to hear about that, but I want to specifically hear, Sullivan. There's a track of yours called Pep Talk from what's your album? Your Moments.
Moments Preserved.
Moments Preserved. And I was listening to that specifically. You're soloing on that track, and your relationship with swing and your relationship with the beats and your feel is very distinctive to me. So my question is swing something different in New Orleans? Is it slightly outside of what everyone else in America is doing? Because I don't know, it just the way swing's indescribable and unnotatable. We know that. But yeah, is your relationship with swing and the beat, does that come from New Orleans? And is it different there?
I would say that my idea of swing and just being able to play, period, and how I feel time is kind of representative of my times in New Orleans and being in New York.
Okay.
And, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say that my swing beat, if that's what it's called, is traditional to New Orleans, you know, or like, you know, I just have this idea that, you know, when I listen to the masters of swing, you know what I mean? You talk about people like Duke Ellington, you talk about people like Bud Powell, you talk about people like Sonny Clark, and you talk about Basie, you talk about people like that. These are people who played in many different parts of the beat at any different time. You talk Duke Ellington always played on top. You know, Basie was somewhere in the middle. Bud Powell, sometimes depending on how he was feeling, was at the back. Decca Gordon was at the back. You know what I mean? So I feel that there should be some type of fluidity. You know, and I feel that with swing comes that type of fluidity. It's understanding the power of the quarter note, understanding the power of the triplet and what the triplet does, understanding what the eighth note does, understanding what the 16th note does, and understanding how all of those things relate to what the rhythm section does, and how it creates this gumbo of rhythm, which is really what we're talking about.
I love that phrase, man. That's beautiful. A gumbo of rhythm. That's really cool.
You know what I mean? Because I mean, and without that, I mean, Jelly Roll Morton said, jazz is to be played sweet, soft, and plenty of rhythm. If there's not a whole lot of rhythm and everybody's in one place consistently, it's not really swing to me.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I'm always looking for those tension spots.
Okay, sweet. Next one. Next question. So when I finished listening to this album, I made my way through your discography, and you're at the, you're not 70, you're somewhat towards the start of your career, and a word I keep coming back to, your work with Roy Hargrove, Theo Croker, Etienne Charles, we'll come to the vocalists you work with, we'll come to Paul Simon. I keep hearing the word imagination. Every time I listen to you play, you're staggeringly imaginative, man. And that's a huge compliment, I hope. I just love how every time, we've all got these 88 keys and, and 12 keys later, there's the repetition of that one and so on. And, and every time we sit down, we're trying to find a new way of doing things. But you've got this massive imagination, man. And then I listened to you on Paul Simon's record, which I want to talk about. But you don't compromise. You don't compromise at all. There's that track, Some Folks Roll Easy. And I'm thinking, well, he's with Paul Simon now. He's going to, not that Paul Simon's not obviously a genius and a very imaginative musician, but some of the Messiaen via jazz, I'm thinking, how is he going to get that into a Paul Simon record? But then I put it on, it's like, jeez, you're reharmonizing everything. So how did you get the call from Paul? How did you get the gig? Talk me about that project. And was that arrangement his or yours? Or tell me about all of that.
I always like talking about this story because it, to me, is probably one of the most enlightening moments of my life so far.
Wow,
just
cool.
To work with somebody, at that level. I was introduced to Mr. Simon by Jamie Haddad, who was his percussion player for years. And he said that he called me, he said, Paul Simon is looking, he's looking to do a new record and kind of like reimagine some of his old music. And I was like, are you interested in doing it? And I was so dumb. I was like, oh man, I'm getting ready to work with a Beatle. So I called my dad and said, I'm getting ready to work with one of the Beatles.
You didn't say that.
I swear to God. I swear to God.
Wow.
And my dad said, who? They said, Paul McCartney? He was like, no, Paul Simon. That's like, you idiot, no. That's Paul McCartney for the Beatles. Paul Simon is Simon and Garfunkel. And I was like, well, what songs do they do? I mean, I'm in the jazz.
Oh my gosh, really?
So far deep, I wasn't even thinking. And he was like, Bridge Over Troubled Water. Come on, man. And it was like, oh, okay.
That guy.
It's that guy, right? So around this time, I get, I'm in the American Pianist Association, and I stay at this host family's house in Indianapolis called, with this other group of people who I love so much called the Lymans. And they were like, you've never heard of Simon and Garfunkel? So they gave me every single record, of Simon and Garfunkel and every record of Paul Simon. Graceland. I mean, just like all
the best songwriting ever. I mean, it's the best.
Exactly.
It's as good as songwriting can get, I think. Him and Stevie Wonder, I would say. That's as good as it gets. Yeah.
I mean, that's top tier. And that's something that I was kind of hoping.
Mozart, Schubert, Paul Simon, Stevie Wonder. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I was like, man, I want to work with a pop singer. And then I get this call. I was like, but I wasn't thinking about this kind of pop. I was thinking about something else.
You're thinking of like John Legend with 3 chords or whatever. Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about. That's what my head is.
Yeah.
So anyway, they set up a meeting with me at Paul Simon's house in like Midtown Manhattan. So I go to his
You didn't say, good afternoon, Mr. McCartney, did you? You didn't do that.
No, I didn't do that.
Good. That's really good.
I waited in his office for 30 minutes though. I waited for him to show up. Like all the stories you hear of these pop legends, you show up on time and you wait 30 minutes for them to show up. I mean, I'm looking at his Congressional Medal of Honor. I'm looking at all his Grammys.
You're at his house. You're at Paul Simon's house.
No, I'm at his office.
His office. Okay. Sorry, you said yeah.
Yeah. So I wait for him and he sits me down. And he says, so I have a list of 14 songs, and I want you to pick the 2 that speak to you. He said the basis of this concept is that these were songs that I liked that never really took off the way I wanted them to take off, or they were never finished, but I recorded them anyway.
Amazing, man. Wow.
So I was like, okay. So I said, all right. So I was like, I guess, what do you want me to do with them? He said, look, go as far away from it as you possibly can, as you want to. Let me reel it in. He said, let me reel it in. If I say it sounds good, that means I don't like it. If I say that it's good, if I say that it's interesting, then I like it.
Oh, so he wanted Sullivan Fortner to be Sullivan Fortner, and no, he said he gave you the free rein for that.
He did. He did.
Yeah.
Now, what happened when we got to the studio finally, and I was like, all right, cool. I had this arrangement written, and I was like, okay, now I play it solo piano, because I'm looking for other musicians to show up. It was just me by myself.
Did he say it was solo piano, or did he say there's going to be piano-bass drums, or what have you?
He didn't tell me any of that later. He didn't tell me any of that till after I laid it down.
Okay.
So then he was like, okay, what song is this? And I said, this is Some Folks' Lives Roll Easy. He was like, okay, I like that song. I mean, I never really finished it, but I liked it. And he told me this. He said, focus more on the folks who have hard times rather than the folks whose lives roll easy.
You made it too pretty. You made it too beautiful.
The arrangement that I wrote for him originally was too pretty.
Yeah.
So what ended up being on the record was an improvisation of an arrangement that I wrote.
Wow, man. That's amazing. There's so many.
If you would have asked me what I played on there, I have no clue what that was.
Well, for people who want to check it out, I mean, it's a really magical record. And yeah, what you play on there is what I sort of identify as being your harmonically sophisticated, pretty chromatic language. And like I say, you don't compromise at all. I mean, I'm hearing things on that record that you did on this one as well. So I mean, that's what I associate with you. And no. Well, it might also add that record was, Cecile's record was recorded, not the live portion, but the studio portion of that was recorded 2 weeks before I did the Paul Simon album. That's a pretty good year, man. That's a pretty good year.
That was a wild year. 2017 for me was a lot. You know, I recorded Moments Preserved, I did Cecile's album, and I did Paul Simon's album and 2 other albums within a 2-month period.
Man, thanks for sharing that with us, Sullivan. That's incredibly, I mean, just to hear that, the idea of you and Paul Simon on a sofa, and he says to you, do what you want. I mean, that's what a great artist does, right? They don't, he got you in that, that's why you were in the room, because he wanted you. Mm-hmm. I love that, man. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's really valuable.
What was the kick about it and what was so humbling about it, honestly, was after I played it, he said, all right, you played it. I like this. Now teach me how to sing it.
Oh my God.
So I have to sing it to him on a microphone. I made a demo of me singing it.
He couldn't find his line? He couldn't find the top line?
He couldn't. Yeah. He really couldn't find how my time was and where it was falling. So once we nailed it in, and once I showed it to him, he was like, "Man, I love this. I love it."
Because I mean, I listened to this yesterday, man, just because I knew I was excited to talk to you. And for people when they listen, your top finger, it catches some of his melody notes, but it doesn't catch all of them. So
those were kind of like my cues for him to kind of hear where the melody goes in that situation.
But the idea that you're teaching Paul Simon's music back to him, and he's been performing and touring it for 50 years, and you're there. Cool. Man, that's made my month, man. That's a great story. I love it. Sullivan, you record and tour with Cecile McLorin Salvant and Jasmine Horn.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had to go anywhere in the world and say who are the two hottest young singers, vocalists in the jazz arena at the moment, you'd probably get 100% of answers would say those two vocalists. I saw Jasmine in Germany 2 years ago, and it was a similar thing. It was one of those that was like, you know, so all the hype, and it was a symposium in Germany, a conference, and I had a beer, and it was just like, and then she started singing, and I was just like, oh my, you know, I think my mouth was on the floor for the whole half an hour. It was just absolutely, you weren't on piano. It was, because I know she has you in for certain tracks, but you're not in her band. It was Victor Gould, I think.
It was Victor, okay. It was Victor.
Yeah. So, but man, you work with these two vocalists. Can you compare and contrast? Talk about how what you get from working with both of them. They're both amazing in different ways. They're very different, but they also have some similarities. And we're so lucky to live in a time where we have artists like this, I think. I mean, it could be that in certain times we're in a really strong period now. I want to come to.
We are. Very fertile.
Yeah,
fertile. A lot of very, very unique musicians. Jasmine. I met Jasmine first. And I don't know how should I be politically correct with saying this?
No, just say what you want to say, man.
Okay, I ended up meeting Cecile while I was on a date with Jasmine. and she'll probably kill me for saying this in public, but yeah, we went out a few times, and I met Cecile randomly walking up and down Harlem.
Right.
And I hadn't heard her sing I hadn't heard Cecile sing until after the For One to Love album came on. So this is her third album that she ever recorded, and the people were she already had got nominated for a Grammy and this or that. I hadn't heard her until after For One to Love came out.
Okay.
So anyway, Jasmine's, they both have a lot of similarities. They both have a lot of common denominators. They both love Servant. They both love Betty Carter. They both love, Ella Fitzgerald. I mean, there's certain common denominators that I feel like draw all singers together.
Yeah.
If there are any differences, I would say, I mean, aside from, one scats more than the other, one has a little bit more of a...
Jasmine scats more than Cecile, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Jasmine has a little bit more of a face, more of in-your-face quality.
Yeah.
Cecile's a little bit more reserved, a little bit more subtle.
Yeah.
They both value storytelling, but the stories that they tell are different. You hear Jasmine is from Dallas, Texas. You know what I mean? You hear it's something about
it's very strident. It's very strident. It's very kind of bullish and confident.
It's very Southern.
Okay.
It's very, very down home, very, very, very Southern. Cecile's culture is very, very diverse.
Where is Cecile from?
She's from Miami, Florida.
Okay.
But her mother's French and her father's Haitian.
Got it.
So you hear the French roots and you hear the Haitian roots along with this Miami kind of swag. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Cecile has a deep respect for Baroque classical music. And
so the ornamentation and a little bit of the
she's really into tone color and ornamentation, and she's really into a lot of things outside of singing, and all of those things kind of bleed into the type of singer that she is.
Wow.
She's into visual arts, she's into movies, she's into reading, she loves characters, and she loves stories.
Well, yeah, because you can't be an interesting artist unless you're an interesting person, I don't think, right? I mean... that one sacrifices without the other. You can definitely not be
an interesting person, and the art kind of reflects something similar.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think
you
so.
know what I mean?
Yeah. Sully, I've got this is a good one for you. Where do you come down on this? And you might tell me, you might not even like the question, but I'd love to know how you react. And this kind of brings everything we spoke about so far. So we're like, you know, complex classical music, the church, New Orleans, New York. For 100 years, jazz has been traversing this journey between art music and popular music. And there's been a push and pull throughout. And I'm not making any value judgments at all. I need to make that clear. Do you care about that conversation? Are you mindful of that conversation? Do you see yourself somewhere within that conversation? We're talking about Paul Simon and him not being compromising, you not being compromising in a good way. Tell me about that thought as for you as an artist and the people you work with as well.
For me, the whole idea, I was watching, it's funny, there's this movie that's called Copying Beethoven.
Oh.
And Ed Harris plays Beethoven in it.
Really?
And,
I've not heard about it.
And he goes to he has this lady who's a copyist who works for him, who's dating a guy who's trying to build a bridge.
An actual bridge.
An actual bridge. And he says there's this bridge contest, and whichever bridge the king likes the best will become the bridge that they actually build across the Danube or something like that. And Beethoven walks up to the man. He said, "So this is your bridge?" He said, "Yes, this is my bridge." He said, "Are you going to win it?" He's like, "What do you mean, am I going to win it? I don't know if I'm going to win it." He said, "I'm asking you, are you going to win it?" He said, "Why are you asking me this?" He said, "Because an artist has no one to trust but himself."
Right.
And that line really kind of stuck out to me. An artist has no one to trust but himself.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of being uncompromising is that if you believe in what it is that you're trying to purvey, from an artistic standpoint, even if you're the only one who believes in it. You know what I'm saying?
I do, I really do, yeah. And you're saying that, so you're the artist you are and you're becoming, and you've got this way of making music, and I mean, again, listening to your records the last couple of days, there's one track where you're at quarter note equals about 250. I did the thing on my iPhone. What's that? Just in time. You found me just in time. Yeah. It's about 340, 350, man. Quarter note equals 340, 350. My mum can't dance to that, man. Like, no one can.
Not at all.
We're talking about 3-part Messiaen, angular, chromatic lines in kind of counterpoint. That's your thing, and the result of that thing is that you're sitting in Manhattan on a sofa with Paul Simon. He's saying, "Do your thing," and I've got like goosebumps just saying that to you, because I'm always, you know, I'm a musician and a composer myself, and I'm in the world that we're in. I'm not at your level, but I'm always concerned that if, you know, when I'm composing, but like I think, well, that's so complicated, no one's going to get that, or like, you know, if I really put that bridge in, like that's going to kill the piece for radio play. No DJ is going to play that. And what you're teaching us is, no, just do your thing as well as you possibly can, and the world will kind of find you. So that's really
right. I mean, I really believe that a lot of the great artists that we revere, I mean, be it Bach, whose music was lost for 100 years after he died, you know, I mean, people like Thelonious Monk, whose music wasn't respected until after he died.
Yeah.
You know, you think of, you know, there's so many people who, you know, the world kind of had to catch up to it.
Yeah. So,
and music itself was somewhat prophetic. You know, I'm not saying that I'm deservedly in one of those type of players or whatever, but I'm saying that if it's in you and it's in your heart and it's the gift that God gave you, then utilize it, push it, take it apart, put it back together, really dissect it, you know, like really investigate how different things that are inside of you first, and don't be afraid to. And I wish somebody had told me that when I was studying in school.
Well, you're still young, man. I mean, it sounds like you had some amazing teachers. But to come back to my original question then, so it seems to me you don't concern yourself with jazz as pop music or jazz as art music. That's not a preoccupation for you. It's not a conversation for you. Okay.
I mean, I just played my notes. I played my two little notes, and and if it touches somebody, that's great. If it doesn't, then maybe the next one will. I mean, I was never into jazz because of what it could give me as far as money and popularity and fame. I just loved Errol Garner so much. I just loved Errol Garner, and I loved Art Tatum, and you know, those were, and Oscar Peterson, and how they made me feel.
Yeah. That's good. So talk about your piano's behind you. Talk about how you work. On your records, you have a couple of standards, but a lot of your own music as well when you write for your trio. Can you talk about how much do you practice each day, your regime, your work ethic, how you create new music? Where does the music that I'm playing on the radio station, where does it come from in terms of practical, like I'm at the piano every morning with a coffee at 8 a.m. composing, or is it like just when the muse strikes you?
Those records for me and before quarantine, it's kind of just been like whenever the mood strikes or whenever there's a deadline, I'd write.
Yeah.
But I've been on the road so much that, you know, I just never really adjusted to any type of routine. Now, since quarantine, I have, I've done this thing where I wake up every morning at around 10 o'clock, have a coffee, and sight read some Bach. That's the first thing I do.
Nice, man. That's a great way to start the day. Yeah.
And then I go for a walk, and I'd exercise for a half hour. After the walk, come back, maybe do a little bit of reading. Today is my day in the kitchen, so I cook. And then I spend the rest of the day kind of going over either some standards or like just working out like different tunes and different ways of playing tunes. If I have a recording that I'm doing during quarantine, I'll just go ahead and just lay it down. Or, you know, if there's some music I have to learn for a recording, I go and practice that. But for the most part, as far as a routine, my routine is kind of dedicated towards more reading as opposed to more composing.
Yeah, wow.
If I do compose, it will be a composition that is based on the tune that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
And it could be cross-genre. So yesterday I wrote a piece that was based off of this R&B song by Brandy and Monica called The Boy Is Mine. And I just, yeah.
Well, there's a Paul McCartney, Stevie Wonder song called The Girl Is Mine. The Girl Is Mine. That's not what you would, different song. I don't know the one you were talking about.
Different one. This is from the 90s. This is something that my girlfriend was playing while she was exercising. And it's just two chords, literally, F sharp minor and C sharp minor. And I made up an alternate melody and then reharmed it, and then there's a new tune.
I want to hear it. When can we hear this?
It's not completely ready yet, but maybe I'm supposed to play a concert on Saturday at Smalls.
Sullivan, I want to come back to New York at the very end, but you were in Roy Hargrove's band from 2010 to 2017, touring, recording. What made him special? What made Roy Hargrove special?
That's a very layered question. What made Roy special? I mean, musically, one of the things that made him special was his tone. Roy, I've seen this many times. Roy would pick up a flugelhorn and play the melody straight. Just straight tone, no vibrato, just straight tone.
Right.
And I look out in the audience after he's finished playing the melody, and you can always spot out like maybe one or two people that are crying. he just had, it was something in his sound.
Yeah.
His sound alone.
Does that no vibrato thing come from someone? I'm trying to think, is there a precedent for that? Did someone, I mean, Clark Terry, you think sound, but I think he used vibrato. I can't hear right now. Well, I can hear it. Like, did anyone else not use vibrato in their trumpet playing specifically? I'm trying to think if there was a...
Yeah, I mean, there are people like Art Farmer, and you think of people
like... Oh, yeah, Chet Baker. There's not much
Baker, vibrato. You know what I mean? Yeah, but Roy to me kind of... There's certain aspects of Roy reminded me of Kenny Dorham. Certain aspects of him reminded me of Blue Mitchell. Certain aspects of him reminded me of Clifford Brown and Fats Navarro.
Right.
Freddie Hubbard when he was really feeling it, you know.
He had a very different sound to Freddie Hubbard, though.
Yeah, I mean, but you could tell the influence was there.
Yeah.
I mean, Roy's the type of person that could just sing anybody solo. He just
right.
He hears it one time and he's got it. He can just go and sing people solo from random recordings. You know what I mean? And you know, but Roy was special, not so much for what he played, but what he didn't play.
Nice.
My years with Roy was towards the end of his strong period, going into his really started to health really started to decline.
Yeah.
And I really saw the depth of his musicality beyond the pyrotechnics of playing the trumpet.
Wow.
So you get, you know, trumpet players are expected to play high, they're expected to play fast, they're expected to do all kinds of magic tricks and circular breathe and do all of this stuff. When Roy's range was taken away from him, it totally made him really have to dig for melody.
Yeah. Right. That must have been pretty amazing to witness that from 3 feet away and to be, you know,
Man, it's wild. And there was certain cues that I got from him. Roy was the type of leader, we didn't really have any rehearsals.
Right.
And he was the type of leader that never really said anything to anybody. Everything that you needed to know about how he felt about what you were doing behind him or what was going on was all in how he played. And it took me a few years to get that.
Right.
Because before then, I was just used to leaders telling me, don't play like this, play like this. Don't do this, do this. Roy wouldn't say anything. Roy would let me play and figure it out in his band. You know, and no matter where it was, and no matter who was in the audience, he would just sit there and let me figure it out.
Was he shy? Was he a shy person?
He was.
Because you say he didn't give any directions, and Miles obviously was famous for the same thing. I'm just wondering why, what he was like as a person, whether that was a reflection of his character.
Definitely, he was very quiet. He didn't really like to talk a lot. He was a man of few words. Okay. Yeah. But what he said, you know, was very direct, and we rarely ever talked about music.
Wow. Everyone says
rarely ever talked about music. He was always reading something. He always had a book. You know, he always, you know, and during that, a lot of those times he was kind of sick. So
yeah,
well, it was a lot of ups and downs with his health. But for the most part, when he was feeling good, he was really relaxed, really chill. You know, have a cigarette, have a Coke, and chill out.
Hey man, I'm so grateful to you for sharing all this with us. Our all-night jazz audience here in Florida it's so lovely to get these. We're talking about, you know, some of the most important figures in our music, whether it's Cecile or Jazz Mayer, Roy Hargrove, you know, then going to Paul Simon. We're getting an inside track here on working with some of these giants. It's amazing, man. Sullivan, there's something, and I'd love to know your take on this. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and I know New York was really suffering. I'm down here in Florida now, and it's kind of getting worse here at the moment. But the thing in the back of my mind, you know, we're on social media a lot, and we're also trying to see what everyone's up to. How can we make our careers work for us going forward? And, you know, what's the future going to be? And what I keep coming back to is you know, this music's got to be important to people. It's got to matter. It's got to make a difference. And I try and as a broadcaster, try and show that. Like, if I can play a track and you've had a terrible day, and I put on a Bill Evans record or a Sullivan Fortner record, whatever it might be, and that something in that music has turned someone's day around, so they're at the end of the music feeling better about it, then that's because we're not doctors or nurses, or we're not, and you know, we're seeing they're the real kind of pillars of society now. But we have to make a case, I think, that our music, jazz music, is important. You're in New York, you're from New Orleans, that's about as good as it gets in terms of the history of the music. I mean, sorry, the Chicagoans or Kansas City folks, but New Orleans and New York were the center of the jazz, you know, it's about as important as it gets. What's your prognosis for the future in terms of gigs and recording and making music, but also how can we make it matter to people? Have you got any thoughts and pearls of wisdom on that?
I honestly don't know. I think that I think as of now, maybe until things kind of go to a new norm, we're going to have to kind of just get used to, you know, just not any opportunity we can to play, but I think that the more music that we have and the more music that we put out, the better.
We've got to eat as well, but people are putting stuff out for free. I don't think that's any good.
No, I don't think that that's good, but I do think that the idea of just, how can I say this? We have to keep making music. We just have to keep making music, and we have to figure out ways to support ourselves while making it, and to support ourselves putting it out. I'm not saying to go out and play free, but I am saying that if there's something that we can do, and then given all of the stuff that's happening politically and all the things that's happening, you know, racially and economically and all of this stuff, there has to be a way that we can kind of join forces.
Yeah.
With all of these things, while we have to think more creative about how we put music out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Instead of giving free concerts on Facebook, there's got to be something that we can do that, you know, would be beneficial not just to Sullivan Fortner as a business, but to the community as a whole, to the jazz community as a whole, to people who are out protesting, to people who are, you know, sick and dealing with COVID-19. I mean, we have to kind of think broader than, you know, just the jazz bubble and how we can make money as musicians. It's got to spread its tentacles deeper than that. Yeah, I like that. And if you also think about sort of 1968 into the early 70s, that was a great time for music, and it must be soul music, jazz music, sort of the fusion route and stuff. But that was a really strong time, and it must be connected. Whether it's Gil Scott-Heron or Stevie or Marvin Gaye or Sly and the Family Stone, they were all getting politicized, and I think that's no bad thing. I think great music came out of that, and so now should be the time of the artist. Not doctors and nurses first, of course, but then maybe now is our time to say something quite important. I think that's really nice to hear you sort of echo that, really. It's funny. I had a conversation recently with a friend of mine, and it kind of goes along the lines of what you're saying. I would say we have to get back to creating music with a purpose. Yeah. Initially, the preservers of music was the church. Right? And then for some reason, then it went into the concert halls, and then it went into the schools. And now that it's in the schools, it's in the hands of young musicians who I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but don't really understand the functionality of music and what music does. And what does it, like, some of the stuff that you hear on the radio sometimes is like, I wouldn't walk my dog to this music. You know what I mean? more or less dance to it, or more or less. Yeah,
I agree. I agree.
Want to sit and read a book along with it, or, it's just music to sit and just be like, oh, it's music for the sake of music, rather than music for music to move people to do something.
Right. Yeah. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I really like that. I think we should, if we put anything out, we should make sure that it's important. And with that will come the quality and the depth and the profoundness and emotional and sophistication and everything. But it's got to be, I was by my pool, swimming pool here, not my pool, but like near here. And they were playing just the stuff you're describing. And the lyrics were like, could have been written by a 7-year-old. I'm like, why did someone even put like, it's actually condescending to the audience, I think. It's patronizing. It's saying, you can't understand anything more sophisticated than words that seem like the last thing I sent you in a text message. I'm sorry, I'm going to be late for my date, whatever. You don't need to put that out. That's ridiculous. Why someone recorded that? That's a waste of everyone's time.
We talk about the great songwriters like Stevie Wonder, and we talk about Paul Simon, and we talk about Paul McCartney, and we talk about we talk about people who we consider like the great songwriters. And you say, as great and as sophisticated as this music is, I can have a barbecue with this music. I can go dance with my wife or my girlfriend to this music. I can go for a run and listen to this music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not too sophisticated where you lose the commonality of man.
Wow, I love that. That's beautiful, man. That's really lovely. You know what I mean? So it can have a big audience. It's not too sophisticated that it can't touch everyone in this room. It's kind of
right.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just a level. It just has to have a level of purity and honesty with it.
Yeah.
You know.
Sullivan, that's really lovely. I'm gonna wrap this up. I always ask my interviewees this. Can you give me a handful of jazz solos, jazz compositions, tracks? So you can go outside jazz if you want. Music that always makes you smile, that you always come back to whenever it comes on. It just gives you, connects in here and just makes you've got a great smile, man. And what tracks, solos, performances always bring that out in you?
Every time I hear Errol Garner play Thanks for the Memories.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I mean, just thinking about it, it's like sends chills because it doesn't get happier than that. Happier than that. Charlie Parker playing Cherokee.
Yeah.
Coco. Charlie Parker's classic solo on Coco.
Okay.
Louis Armstrong playing When You're Smiling. And it's amazing how every time he picks up the horn, not just when he sings it, because the singing is great, but when he picks up the horn, it's just a whole other level of life. And all he's doing is playing melody.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Anything by Sarah Vaughan singing, oh man, what was that? I was just listening to her sing. And in memory of the late, great Johnny Mandel, listening to her sing The Shadow of Your Smile.
Oh, wow. Yeah, lovely. Yeah.
With, and it's that specific trio with Bob James.
Wow.
Bob James trio.
Yeah, right.
That video, every time I hear that crap, it makes me, it's just like great accompaniment. Everything's just
That's
great.
So cool. Bob James was my guest 2 weeks ago. He's on this series. So that's so cool. I'd forgotten that he was working with Sarah Vaughan towards the end of her career. Yeah.
Oh my God, man.
That's right.
Sarah, man. Yeah. Bob James worked with everybody.
Yeah.
Bob James worked with everybody.
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder. I mean, Donny Hathaway. Just listening to Donny Hathaway sing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just as much listening to Take Six sing. I mean, you know, it's just certain things bring like a certain type of nostalgia and it reminds me of my childhood, and it just reminds me of, my family and sitting around the house singing and stuff.
Yeah. A joy.
Yes.
Sullivan Fortner, on behalf of All Night Jazz, WUSF 89.7 FM, it's been a complete dream to talk to you, man, and to hear about your musical life so far. Keep in touch. We wish you loads of luck, and we're excited to get your new projects and to see what your next kind of where music takes you, man. So thank you so much for your time, and all the very best.
Thank you. I'm sorry about, having to get up and deal with the ribs. I'm just a little nervous about it, but we got it together. So it's all good.
That's a jazz musician in the real world. I mean, you got to make ribs and you got to finish your lunch and
Hey, man, that's all right. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.